Hi, Newchip community. My name is Shawheen Attar from the Newchip product team. And as always, I want to thank you for participating in the September demo week and choosing to join us for this particular panel discussion. Today, we're going to be talking about how next-gen blockchain is changing our future. As the world has seen over the past decade or so, blockchain technology and its various implementations have grown dramatically in multiple different industries. Most famously, we've seen the rise in blockchain within cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum, and most recently with NFTs and digital collectibles. But these applications only scratch the surface of the potential impact and implications of a more expanded use of blockchain technology. Today, our panelists will be discussing all these topics surrounding the future of blockchain. They come from different backgrounds and are speaking to us from all around the world, including the US, UK, and Dubai. I'm joined today by David, Brian, and Haisam, and we'll start off by first doing introductions. David, I'll let you kick us off.
Great, so appreciate it, Shawheen. David Russek, I'm the founder of EntreOne. EntreOne is a company that focuses on digital media within blockchain and specifically around non-fungible digital collectible assets. Partly a white labeled marketplace, but a technology that enables personalization, video assets, and community to be built around experiences that become seen as valuable by groups of people. So that's a quick snapshot on the company. I've been an entrepreneur for about 30 years. I was there at the early stages of digital media, helped launch QuickTime for Apple. Interestingly, did multiple projects at Belcore around the time that blockchain kind of emanated out of Belcore in the 90s. And then I went on to take a couple of companies public and all around digital media, internet, CD-ROM, and social media technologies. So a quick snapshot on me. Appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel today.
Great, Brian, go ahead.
Hi there, thanks for the invite. My name is Brian McNulty. I'm the CEO and founder of FundAdminChain, or FAC as we're more regularly referred to. So what we're doing is we're providing the global funds industry with the ability to create, to distribute, to trade and settle tokenized digital funds. And we're obviously leveraging blockchain in the background to the powers of DLT to enable that. So by using FAC, we're allowing asset managers to fast track the creation of these new products and distribute them, but also to retain and improve their margins. So we're taking a lot of the unnecessary spend across the value chain supporting funds, and we are reallocating that to the parties on our network. I've been working exclusively on DLT blockchain since 2015 when I set up the post-trade distributed ledger group, and then worked as COO for R3, who have built Corda, which is one of the more prominent blockchain protocols. Prior to that, 20 years creating the mess that we're now trying to unwind with blockchain.
Awesome, and Haisam?
Yeah, thanks. My name is Haisam Jamal, and I'm the CEO of Distichain. At Distichain, what we do is we deliver B2B marketplaces and we deliver them as a service. So basically, B2B trade, and especially when it comes to cross-border trading, is quite complex. And with our technology, we can deliver marketplaces within 3 to 4 hours, fully integrated with banking, logistics, inspection, insurance, and all the lot. Basically, the way we're set up is we have our infrastructure. We create marketplaces very similar to what Shopify do, but our process is very different. We use blockchain to manage our trade, which really breaks down the complexity and allows all the participants to be in one place, and we're able to govern the trade accordingly. And our service providers are built based on B2B service providers that are able to kind of really handle cross-border trading. So we're not looking at fast mile delivery, but rather the containers and the pallets moving across the world from one place to the other. So as such, we aggregate those services using blockchain, and we're able to deliver seamless trade. Personally, I come from a corporate background, a background with Procter & Gamble, Kraft Foods, Nokia, and the largest partner in the world for LVMH Group. So very much into the retail distribution and e-commerce side of things. But when we saw the technology advancements that small companies and large companies alike what they were doing, and how that was going to change the world that we knew in cross-border trading, distribution, retail, we saw an opportunity there to create a platform that gives companies, regardless of size and location, the accessibility to these services in a seamless environment. So that's basically what we do at Distichain.
Great, thank you all for the insight onto your backgrounds and what you do. Diving into some of the questions we got prepared here, but related to some of the things y'all already discussed in your backgrounds, we've seen a rise of using distributed ledgers in multiple different applications beyond, the famous case of cryptocurrency. From a high level, what are other ways that blockchain brings values to organizations and changes the ways companies do business? I'll give it off to David to start us off here again.
Great. So I think no, it's interesting hearing everybody else's backgrounds in it. I threw out some common threads there. You're dealing with a global scale type of architecture, right? And particularly from myself and companies that I've been previously involved with, and everybody else's companies, you've had a shifting landscape of different technology infrastructures to accomplish something within banking and asset management, or logistics and supply chain and trading assets. In our case, we focus more on assets that are around digital media, streaming content, video content, social media content, that kind of ecosystem, entertainment. But the one thing you have across the board is the ability to add value, and I think Brian said it, and the same thing happened to us, is as we were progressing with an initiative we were working on, which was for Mark Hamill, and we actually implemented the first shown in public video NFT. We were looking for a technology that gave us ability to authenticate that asset, because when you move into the digital rights issues, in the digital assets, you want to make sure that you maintain a couple things: security, decentralization, ability to understand, provenance of those assets, and then have a way from a registration perspective to make sure that the value that is seen in there, the trusted value that you've got, doesn't get let out or burst relative to your global community ecosystem. So I think those are some of the high points. Then it's a matter of creatively applying that to whatever type of business or specific arena that you're in. So just a couple of quick perspectives from from our standpoint, but try to loop it back into what the other panelists are focused on as well.
If anyone wants to jump in here.
Yeah, well, I'll come in. I think it's at the heart of this, what many of the use cases, the applications, the business problems the business opportunities we're identifying are simply down to the fact that we can now share data in a different way. So because you can share data in a way that makes sure that data is always in sync and it's never inaccurate, then it just lends itself to many existing business processes being improved, where you currently have siloed data needing to be reconciled, or an intermediary taking a fee to do that role. So in many use cases, we can actually remove the intermediary, which saves costs and saves risks and time, or we can make the role of what the intermediary does be much more efficient, which ultimately still, in some instances, they are required because they've got the capability or the resilience or the broader services that are required, but you can enable them to do what they do more efficiently. You can interact with them and integrate in a much more streamlined way. And that could be a single organization looking about how they improve their own operations, or it could be how organizations collaborate to think about different ways of doing business.
So David and Brian have really said some very important points, and I've just noted down some key words that each of you have said. Authentication, security, and decentralization, right? And that is huge. I mean, to have authentic, secure data, which is not, locked up in a little safe somewhere where very few people have access to. That is huge. And then how is it huge? It's, well, sharing data in sync, which Brian was alluding to and talking about sharing data in sync and automating business processes, and what is the role of the intermediaries. Why? Because you're able to share authenticated data securely, and you're able to share it easily. And that's really what blockchain is all about. And that's the opportunity we tried to jump on, because if you start to think of what is the most complex, one of the most complex things that is so significant in the world, but still is so complex that it's just a dinosaur. And that's, for us, it's global trade, right? I mean, anybody who's tried to import or export anything into anywhere in the world, especially if you go into the third world, it becomes it's a very complex process, and there are so many stakeholders, and by able to kind of have that authenticated, secure data available to all, where you're giving permissions to the people that have rights to have permissions, that then breaks down all of that complexity and allows a supply chain that starts from the very start all the way to the end. And guess what? Now you can do it. You can do it in an automated fashion, because it's no longer kind of, you've got to get 17,000 systems to cooperate with each other, which is a nightmare. And in our view, that's why B2B e-commerce has not been so successful, or as talked about, or as common as the B2C trade has. B2C e-commerce has changed all of our lives. I mean, all of us do it, and will continue to do it, and it's only going to grow. But B2B has the opportunity now with this new technology, and especially with the distributed ledgers and the smart contracts, to really change the game, and to become as simple as an Amazon experience or an eBay experience per se.
Awesome. Yeah. And you already sort of dove into where I was leading to next, but each of you is leading a company that, implements blockchain in a different way, NFTs, global trade and marketplaces, tokenizing funds. And Haisam, you've already started this, but can you all expand on your company's specific implementations of blockchain and how it's disrupting the industry that you're in, and where you see your companies expanding to in the future, and how you guys view that?
I can kick things off. So we're specifically focused on funds. So tokenizing funds, both mutual funds and private funds. They are different, but leveraging the same concept and the same core base of a solution to do that. So what we enable is we provide the network and the software to allow fund managers to streamline the launching of a tokenized fund through smart contracts, etc. And then we, with our banking partners, and we're talking about tier 1 funds here, so we've got 14 fund managers now on board. We then have a tier 1 banking partner to tokenize investors' cash. Once you've got cash and the fund on the, we use a private blockchain, so it's extremely important for us. It's a private blockchain, so only permission parties on that can be on that. So the fund managers, investors can be confident that the KYCs in place, that the parties are doing business with have got the right regulations. Once they are there, then our software enables the immediate trading, the immediate settlements. You're wrapping the cash leg and the fund leg up, so it's atomic settlement for the first time. And then we've got all of the fund service providers on this. We've got 5 global transfer agents that go back many years. They were seen us as a threat to come in and disrupt your business, but now we've moved it to a realization that we're working in their best interest. We're collapsing their operations and streamlining them so that they get an increased margin, and ultimately we're collapsing a lot of the distribution layers and fees for getting those funds out. So if you've got the ability to launch, distribute, trade and settle funds, and at some point in the future of the regulators of the node on there to collapse that, then you're taking an eye-watering amount of processing out of the funds industry and collapsing that onto a much simpler network. We'll come on to the challenges. I believe you want to talk about that, but the challenges is that, well, the challenge is it's difficult to design and build a global and production-ready, resilient blockchain network and software. It's extremely difficult, but the challenges are not that. The challenges are, how do you get parties to collaborate that are competing and ultimately are going to need to rethink the business model. So I'm sure we'll come on to that. So we are doing the same in the private space. We're working, starting out in Bermuda. We've got our first funds launched onto our platform to our service providers. And from our point of view, we're raising right now. We've had our seed round last year, and now we're raising again to just scale.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else want to dive into how your company is disrupting the industry?
I mean, as far as we're concerned, when we looked at blockchain, we didn't see crypto or Bitcoin, or we saw smart contracts. We saw distributed ledgers and smart contracts, and we saw the ability to kind of have a very complex business process being shared amongst different parties. And it wasn't us. I mean, it wasn't unique to what we were doing. I mean, big companies and small companies alike were getting in on this and saw the opportunity. Now, some will be more successful than others, and some will do it better than others, and some. But let me give you an example. You had TradeLens being created by Maersk and IBM, two of the largest companies in the world. IBM and Maersk, one of the largest shipping companies in the world. And what they were doing with TradeLens was trying to use blockchain to break down the 330, if I'm not mistaken, steps, just to do a cross-border logistics process. 330 steps, with every step is, you've got port authorities involved, you've got taxation authorities involved, you've got clearance authorities involved, you've got shippers, freight forwarders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these are involved, and according to DHL, it's 330 steps. So how do you break that down in a simple process? How do you kind of get the sharing of data in a secure and I'm going back to secure and authentic way? And that is done, using blockchain technology, using smart contracts, etc. Give you another example. HSBC and Standard & Chartered and a few other banks created a consortium to create a company that was there to digitize the letter of credit. Now, anybody who's done trade knows how complex it is. I mean, how many emails just between company, bank, and company, and 2 weeks of work just to get a letter of credit agreed. In a blockchain environment, it's standardized and it becomes as easy as using a credit card. And this is where it's a game changer. So now you've got companies buying from companies they do not know on the other side of the world. on credit, on $1 million on credit, and you know, you've got the bank digitally linked in to the transaction in real time. And that's a game changer. That wasn't possible in the past because you know, just to get the connectivity, you know, in a secure environment was basically an impossibility. And if you did, you got it between two banks, let alone 40, 50 banks on one network. So that's really where the game change. Now, what we saw as Distichain is that's great. I've got now a digital letter of credit. I've got digital trade finance. I've got digital shipping, but you need all of those to do trade. You don't need one of them. So rather than starting at the start of the shipping process and ending at the end of that, let's start at the creation of the deal, the buyer, the seller, the deal, right? Put that as the start of our blockchains. Put that as the start of our smart contract, and then factor in the payment, factor in the logistics, factor in the inspection, the insurance, etc. And there you've got a whole end-to-end cross-border trade, which is happening in one system effectively. And that's where this is how this will disrupt global trade. And why is that important? Because today in different industries, you have middlemen, you have intermediaries who are taking a lot of the value out of the system. In agriculture, they could take, you know, I heard a number like 85% of cashew nuts value is actually given to middlemen, not to the people who grow it. And that's ridiculous. I mean, I think the person producing the product would be the guy that has the most value. It's not the case. It's the guy facilitating this process. Now, if a technology can do this process and do it basically for very cheap, then that's a whole lot more money for the producer. That's a whole lot more money for the retailer, and that's a whole lot of savings on the consumer. And that's a game changer. So that's really kind of how we saw, when we looked at blockchain, that's the opportunity that we saw, and that's kind of the basis behind what we built, Distichain.
Yeah, just to follow up with that, I mean, that's essentially the constructs of blockchain, the value, right? So all you need to do is move across industry. So you have an asset, you have a normal trading process that has happened, built off of internet sometimes, maybe traditional previous to that. And in our case, the same construct, you know, held true. So, you know, from our perspective, the folks that have the value are the rights holders of digital content, digital media, right? Whether it be a sports team, whether it be a sports league, whether it be an artist, you know, a musician, okay? And if you look at history, especially as it applies to digital, like manifestation, right? You have now all these different intermediaries, right? But what ultimately goes back to that original point of the person who created that piece of art or that piece of digital asset, right? The music, how have they gotten disintermediated and, you know, kind of moved aside relative to where's the true value? And, you know, if you look at social media, if you look at video distribution, right, it's like a perfect use case. So having come out of the music and entertainment industry and, you know, use CD-ROM technology initially and internet technology and then social media technology to help kind of bring the artist to the fore relative to user experiences with consumer. If you look at it from a B2B perspective, you know, they have a supply chain as well, right, of those assets. But now they can bring that back where now in the case of an NFT, right, the original artist can participate not only now, but on a recurring basis because there's some level of authentication, okay, over time, right? That's immutable, right? So then, you know, what happens in X years, I know I might be getting to the later question, but what happens later, you know, in the coming years relative to all those entities in the digital video space that have said, oh, we're going to take it and build massive companies off of it, right? But not give things back, right? So for instance, like here, you know, we're recording this in an interesting way. We couldn't have done this 10 years ago, right? to have a multiplex feed that's socially contextable, right? Where you're recording it, right? And then you're going to edit it and then play this back as value, all right? So then, and all the panelists, we know we're getting a 40%, 50% cut on the revenues in the future. I'm just kidding. But, that's essentially what, kind of the constructs of what you can do when you start using smart contracts to be able to have assets, in our case, digital video, digital media, kind of put out there to be able to provide, authentication and security and all that. Again, it always comes back to Mark Hamill. You don't, you have an asset and you don't want to put it out there to be able to be brought down in value wise. So we're doing that, and then it's a matter of how do you do that with a community, right? If you look at the NFT activity right now, we're involved with multiple initiatives that, use an NFT in a an entry point into a community, right? Of fans or, audiences that like a specific piece of content or a specific artist or something, right? So who's benefiting from that? Should be the artist. Should be the musician that is not necessarily, saying, oh, here, look, social video company or video company, I'm giving you everything I have that you can use free. You don't have to pay me anything, but then you guys can make the huge, sums of money off of with advertising and such. So it is a matter of, looking at how digital technologies over the past 10 years have disintermediated, but then put that power back into the hands of the ultimate, originator of that value, if you will. So.
And I just add to that, without the difference between before and now is that it used to be the record labels that used to make a lot of that money. So now, now the power is really with the artist.
Right. Yep. Or the asset, the rights holder. Really, if you think about the original rights holder. So.
Absolutely, the rights holder, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's awesome stuff. Before I ask the next question, Brian, want to check in, make sure you're still there.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm just off camera. Apologies. There's just a lot of kids running around. So
no worries. Will you be able to turn it on for responding to the next question? I'm still here, so I'll answer away. It's just this, unfortunately, I'm working from home and it's school out time. So just ask away and I'll answer off camera. Sure. We'll continue that way. All right. So, yeah, we discussed a lot of the cool stuff y'all are working on, and some of the things that are changing. And with change, there are a lot of challenges, especially with blockchain as a technology and adopting it. I know scalability, energy consumption, interoperability, just getting people to adopt an unfamiliar technology. What do you think are the challenges that need to be tackled first in order to really drive adoption, mass adoption across these different industries y'all are in?
I'll maybe come in here. I'm not sure about first. I would say in parallel. Unfortunately, there's a few statements I hear people say it doesn't matter which blockchain protocol you use is one nonsense statement. It matters considerably depending on your use case. Some are better fit for purpose than others, but unfortunately, many of them are not fit for purpose for anything. And you got to sort of make sure that you do your homework and select a protocol that doesn't give you some of the problems you're talking about. For example, we use R3's Corda, so there's no throughput scalability issues there. There's no issues with energy consumption because ultimately you're using parts of the powers of blockchain, but you're only sharing data with parties that you want to, and you're storing it in more traditional ways at the nodes and traditional databases, and you're not putting it in a big block. You're not putting in a big chain. It's simply a DLT and a smart way of dealing with data. So I think that selecting the right platform, building it properly, and this is where unfortunately, again, like a large chunk, if not the majority of blockchain solutions are going to fall down when they get to try and go into production. And many of them are built in a way architecturally that means that you can't, they're either unextensible or they can't actually perform in a collaborative way, and that is one code base that they're then looking for organizations to take different levels of responsibility, different roles, and even in some cases regulatory sign off. And you can't do that if you're all on the same big piece of code. So unfortunately, they're two technical things that have to evolve. And it will evolve as more and more people get it right and get it wrong. It will just become standards, and there'll be tools to enable things to be built faster. But in parallel with tech, again, depends on the use case. But if you're just automating workflow, you can go a lot faster. If you're actually putting value on the chain, if you're putting an asset on the chain, then the regulatory side of things is still got a lot of, there's many years ahead in some instances to get the regulatory sign off, if you like, that the new working practices and the new models are regulatory compliant. And to a degree, that makes sense. Looking after people's money, we're looking after people's interests or value, then it needs to be compliant. But unfortunately, it still does seem to be going slow in some places versus the demand that we now are seeing to get to production. And I could go on, but I'll maybe just sign off with a third major challenge is the business models. A lot of these blockchain initiatives have got really bad or not appealing ROIs or sort of J-curve value versus spend. Either in production, you need scale before it makes sense, or the journey to get there, like to try and convince organizations to use their limited resources and budget to go into something which is ultimately not going to give them an early return, and ultimately even in production, not necessarily an early return. And in many instances, you're asking them to change how they do business. You can understand why it's hard to get the collaboration. And you need to have all participants aligned on a future state commercial construct that is new and that is in their interest, whilst introducing new costs. Business network operator, exchange, etc., the company that's building the solution. So you need to work ludicrously hard to pull all of that off. I mean, I'm glad to say, thanks to the hard work of over 30 blue chip organizations and the phenomenal team we've got, we're out the other end of most of that. But, you know, I see a lot of startups that are proclaiming that they're going to be starting this year, live next year, conquering the world the following year. Unfortunately, it's not quite simple as that.
Yeah, maybe to follow up that. Oh, go ahead.
Go on, please.
Now, to follow up that, I think a couple of things there. Architecture, right, is key, right? So I think with the use case of cryptocurrencies, you know, people are diving in and saying, oh, here's blockchain. Let me go, not even blockchain, here's, you know, cryptocurrencies, and let me go ahead and use it, not really understanding the, you know, structural componentry that makes up a cryptocurrency or, you know, a smart contract, and then everything underneath it. You mentioned, Shawheen, a couple of things, you know, like scalability and such, but, you know, you're talking about throughput, right? So depending on the blockchain that and you know, and the protocols you pick, you could be dealing with like anything from 20 terabytes per second to 2,000 terabytes per second. So there are architectures that, you know, and block and chains that will be able to be used. In our case, you know, we have to address that because we're dealing with assets like video and such, right? So and you don't want to be, you know, implementing something that goes down and, you know, customers get upset, and, you know, you can't go ahead and you know, sell an asset right away because you're waiting for authentication to occur. And then the whole consensus mechanism, you know, factors in, you know, in terms of like energy consumption and such. But yeah, it is a architectural, you know, especially with large brands, you know, they have to look at this from an architectural perspective and understand how it fits in contextually with their business. So if you have a media entity that has rights to assets, that's going to be different than a particular artist or a musician or a sports celebrity and such. So I think it comes down to working with teams of people that have an understanding of how to build massively scaled systems, enterprise wide, right? Otherwise, you're going to deal with the same problems that you're going to have when some kid comes out of college and starts coding and then says he's never understood how to architect something that has global massive scale to it and crashes like the first 5 times that you try to put it into production and or after, right? So you're not dealing with, especially with global brand. Maybe if you do something that has 1 or 2, people hitting it, that's fine. But if you're dealing with massive brands, you have to be careful that people don't get, like the shiny object now is, oh, blockchain and cryptocurrency, and say, I'm going to do that, and then pick people that might be doing one very specific thing and not have any, conception of anything else. I mean, in our case, it was video because, we spent the last 35, or 30 years in the video space, so for us, that's kind of like our ecosystem. So it is architecture because you have to kind of factor all that in. How does it relate to CRM? How does it relate to, if someone's going to be doing that as a big initiative, what are they doing, relative to, the payments? Is there any money laundering technology that is going to be factored into all that? So it's a big initiative from a infrastructure perspective. But with the interoperability stuff, you're able to, I think, compared to 5-10 years ago, be a lot more, mobile, right, if you will, depending on what you choose, private, public, hybrid, all that.
Yeah, I think, just if I were to, so I don't repeat what the guys have said, I just look back at when the internet came out, right? And everybody got on the internet and everybody's kind of creating things on the internet. And we all know what happened. A lot of that was useless. And there was the internet bubble that went, in the wrong direction. And at the time, it was just the buzzword. It was the cool thing. It was sexy, and everybody was in on it. But that doesn't mean that they knew what they were doing. That doesn't mean that they had a use case. That doesn't mean that they were solving a real problem. It was just something cool to say, cool to talk about, But if you look 20 years down the road, who are the biggest companies in the world, right? Internet companies, Google, Amazon, and so on and so forth. So there was a use case there. There was a real thing there, but it took some time to weed out and for the traction and the real use cases to kind of come into play. And I would think that we're still in the early stages of blockchain. We're still in the early stages of how to use it. And I believe that, there's some companies out there that have really got some amazing use cases that are really solving big problems and are gonna, be huge down the road. Hopefully some of the 3 companies that are here, we'll see. But the point is but there's a lot of time wasting too. There's a lot of blockchain for the sake of blockchain. Right? Blockchain for the sake of blockchain. Why? Because it's a cool thing to have in your deck. It's a cool thing to have in your business. Doesn't necessarily mean that you've got a business. It just means that you're marketing yourself on it. And I think the ones that are going to be most successful, the businesses that are going to be most successful, are the businesses that don't talk about the blockchain. I mean, I don't sit there and tell people that, hey, come use my system. It's built on Java or built on X, or it's using electricity. That's just the default. That's just how we get there. What we really want to know is, what does it do? And I think that's very important. And I think companies that have to talk so much about, the technology side to a consumer, just confusing them and trying to create hype. A lot of them are. Distichain, for example, my company we don't talk about the blockchain. I mean, if I'm introducing this to a customer, he doesn't really care. He just cares, what does it do? How does it do that? Oh, you mean this is all automated? Oh, that's terrific. Let's talk more. And I think that's where you get to the realities of things. That's where you get to to the essence of it, and that's where you get the success. There's going to be a lot of failures too. That's correct. Also, of course, you know what Brian and David said about doing things in the right way from the start. You know, Corda R3 is kind of the standard for banking now, right? It's when it comes to banking, that's the blockchain. Maybe for trade, it's IBM Hyperledger. Maybe there's others and others and others. Time will tell. But yeah, definitely you need to do something that is relevant, use something that is based on a use case, and you've got to be solving a problem. If you're able to do that and use this technology to empower you to do that, then your company is going to be a success, regardless of what the technology is. And definitely blockchain has some huge benefits, if used correctly, can become very powerful and can really change many different facets within our lives.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. And to wrap this all up, I know some of you already talked about this, but we've seen where blockchain was 5 years ago. We see where it is today. Where do you guys see it going in the next 5, 10 years? Real quick wrap-ups here. Thank you.
I mean, I mean, since there are certain parts of there's certain things that are just going to be, I believe, will be using blockchain. A lot of trade finance, for example, supply chain, will be using blockchain technology. It will add value. It will add value to the farmers, the producers, the factories, and the consumers, and etc. So I think, you know, there'll be specific use cases that the default will become blockchain, the blockchain technology. Just like in many other technologies, says they're good for certain items, but they're not used in others. And I think that's what blockchain will become. You know, the default for certain industries. I mentioned a few, the guys mentioned some others, but the default, not for everything. It's not going to be for everything, but it's going to be adding value in certain parts of our lives that is going to really help us, you know, really recognize the fourth industrial revolution that we talk about.
Yeah, that's totally right. I was on a panel last year, January, okay, at the NFT.nyc, and I was on the panel that was around, do NFTs go mainstream? Okay, because at that point, no one knew what an NFT was. Now, look, there was CryptoPunks, and you know, having been in that space for around 5 years now, right? You know, no one knew that, right? So all the existing leaders right now are like, you know, yeah, we were all in the trade shows, like with 20 other people, and kind of like early days. We've all been through that, you know, if you've been through these cycles before. So, so I was lucky to find myself on that panel, and I proclaimed that, yeah, NFTs will go mainstream, right? So then, it's right now it's proving to be a positive prognostication. With that said, look, blockchain, you know, started in the 90s, early 90s, right? Again, I was doing projects at Belcore, you know, back when they were, you know, those guys were kind of had a little skunkworks activity with, you know, with distributed ledger authentication, and cryptography was added later and such. So it has taken a while, and a lot of it is trying to sort through, okay, how do you use this? How do you apply this stuff? How do you get through like the waste of let's go down this rabbit hole or that rabbit hole and come to some value, and you know, the value, where does the value exist within trading partners? Where does a value exist when you have an asset that needs to be exchanged? Or where does that, you know, exist relative to someone wants to get a cool experience and have something of value that could, you know, potentially be more valuable later, right? So you know, I think it always will take someone to architect things properly, someone to take, you know, a creative mind. But you know, same thing for us. We don't talk about blockchain, or even we don't even talk about NFTs. You know, it's the fan experience. For when you're watching football, you know, on TV on a Sunday, you care about like what's the run of play and are you getting the ball up the field versus end up in the defensive half. You're not thinking about, oh, okay, this is using Linux technology to be able to deploy this on the screen in a smart TV, and then the line that's on there with the yellow line showing where everybody's at, that's this technology. It's not that, right? It's you want to have an experience and be thrilled that your game won or your team won, or hopefully if your team loses and there's next week, right? Or you listen to a song, or you see a painting and you cry, emotion. You get through a transaction and wow, that global trade with these containers went here and everything was fine and we're good, and the money's flowing through, or my assets went from here to here in the banking system, and it didn't get stolen by someone. So those are the things. I think it does still require, like in the early days of the internet or any of these process. We had the same thing. Oh, I do an app. I have an app. Everybody has an app. Well, what is your app? Well, I don't know. I just have an app. Right. So it's like, oh, I'm doing an internet site. Well, what are you doing? Well, I don't know. It's an internet site. Right. So now it's like, oh, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing NFTs. Well, what's an NFT? Well, I don't know, but it's an NFT. It's a cool thing, and I'm going to go do it. Versus, okay, let's sit back and look pragmatically, lay out business value and business cases. And I think that's going to separate things. But hopefully there's enough people focused on that element to be able to, kind of propel blockchain to the next step. So, but it's going to be an exciting ride, as always, with these big cycles. So,
and maybe if I can come in, I'll answer your question directly, and then I'll give a sort of different take, if you like, on what's been said. So I think in 5 years' time, we'll be not too far away from how it looks right now. I think the utopia where DLT blockchain is just a piece of toolkit, the way a Java database is, or a Java solution is some way off, and it's because of the complexity of it. I completely agree. Your end customer of a system is not that interested what happens underneath the bonnet, but that's not who we're working with right now. It's the business models that are being redefined by providers of services to customers. So I see it the other way around. I think it's incredibly important to be understanding what DLT and blockchain means and how those value chains are reorganized, and how the roles, responsibilities, risks are reorganized, and how that has been architecturally designed. Otherwise, you're moving your business to something which is a risk. And yeah, the end customers of those businesses don't care, but you should care. And most of the organizations that are being sold a blockchain solution or building a blockchain solution ultimately need to care greatly about DLT right now. In 5 years' time, they probably not much of a difference. We'll have some big success stories, like value chain success stories, rather than value on ledger, a bit like the ones that you referred to earlier. Funnily enough, they're actually on R3 Corda rather than Ethereum, but those sort of point solutions in trade where we work out how to just do business better is a bit easier. Putting an actual asset or cash onto a ledger, it's going to be a bit longer. We're Charles and Ed, we're probably further ahead in putting mutual funds on than any other organisation in the world, and we've still got quite a bit of work to do. So 5 years, point solutions, loads of failures, loads of startups running out of money for all the reasons we've said. 10 years, beginning to see how we need to join these things together, and then hopefully at that point switching off some of the legacy and the toolkits to enable the next generation of solutions to be built, and the maturity of the protocols means that we can do things faster. Inevitably, some bright sparks will have come up with the new thing that we're all talking about anyway. But ultimately, it's going to be slower than we think. It's always the way. I remember standing up in 2015 and everyone was telling me it was all going to be solved and done within 5 years, and here we are. at the starting line.
Very great, very insightful comments from you guys on blockchain and where it's going. Being cognizant of time, we've gone over a minute, but want to take a second to thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your insights, your experiences today with all of us and with the broader Newchip community. We talked about a lot of useful information during the session about where the technology's been, what y'all are doing with it, and where it's going. And I believe that the audience has learned a lot from y'all. Again, I really appreciate your time and your support on behalf of the company, Newchip, and the community as well. And thank you so much for your contribution. Until next time, thank y'all.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks.